This presentation is about a totally immersive new attraction for tourists and locals that is soon to arrive in San Miguel and to the rest of the world via virtual reality. It's a pop-up, fully immersive, 360-degree dome movie theater with perfect angle seating, socially distanced of course, and follows all the protocols. And once the audience gets settled into their comfy beanbag chair, they will be plunged right into the middle of the story of how this little town, 6,500 feet up in the Sierra Madre Mountains of central Mexico, began its rise from a small 16th century silver mining settlement to become the best city in the world, according to these top international travel magazines. And that moniker has stuck for several years running. And even if you can't travel to this world-famous artist enclave in Mexico, you'll be able to become immersed in this story just the same by downloading the virtual reality version off the web right into your goggles, just like these folks are experiencing it in progress right now. Now, this isn't the first time we've made an immersive dome attraction. Almost every dome theater we set up has a huge waiting line because the show takes the audience on a unique and enveloping adventure.
Welcome, all of you, to this wondrous and mysterious place.
We've created a lot of 360-degree films and experiences for large museums, international tourist destinations, and even the World's Fair in Shanghai.
Organize all our dreams together.
That's where real magic happens.
We love the idea of going back in time to experience the history and culture of fascinating locations and civilizations. It's so much fun to use new animation techniques to give an antique quality to the imagery and to take people back in time to feel what it was really like in ancient Greece or even Saudi Arabia. So why not San Miguel? So this immersive film, depicting the history of how San Miguel de Allende became a world-class artist colony, will be utilizing actual historical photos and imagery which we will juxtapose and animate so the audience can relive the experience all around them. And these are our animated storyboards that will give a good visual idea of what the final dome and virtual reality film will look like. So the audience will be transported back in time to actually relive the story that most tourists, locals, and art enthusiasts from all over the world know nothing about. And what we are also focused on these days, especially for an artist community like San Miguel, is pushing the envelope on how an audience can be immersed in art. So, in addition to the film we are creating right now, we have other artists' 360-degree dome films that are complete and ready to play in the dome as soon as we have it. And the Dome Theater is the perfect spot for a nighttime dance club because the VJs can project stunning animated visuals all around the dance floor. And we will be adding new artists' work each month, so people will want to return to see the new show. And the shooting of our 360-degree film for the dome and for goggles is already in progress, as you will soon see. And we're super excited to be working with the new 360-degree cameras. In the past, for some really elaborate dome shows, we've collaborated with top-tier sponsors who are really getting into this new entertainment medium. And the audiences are pretty much blown away when they experience the immersion.
I've never seen anything like this. No, I've never seen something like this. It's really awesome.
I'm still feeling it.
Complete immersion, art form.
Cutting edge of the transformational 21st century art scene.
And the reason you are seeing this presentation in virtual reality goggles is so you can feel the sensation of what it would be like to be part of the sights, sounds, and pageantry of San Miguel de Allende from inside the San Miguel Dome or in your very own goggles if you can't make it to San Miguel in person. So be sure to look all around in every direction, even up and down and behind, because you won't want to miss anything happening around you. And now we find ourselves in the midst of probably the most famous traditional holiday celebration, Day of the Dead, where inhabitants and visitors alike, in full skeletal makeup, take to the streets to honor and celebrate their family and friends who have passed to the other side. And once a year on this day, the dead can return to visit their family. So the families build altars or ofrendas and put out their loved ones' favorite foods and memorabilia. Everyone makes sugar figurines of the deceased's favorite pastime. And marigolds are placed on the ofrenda so their scent can awaken the dead. And there are so many other religious holidays and celebrations. Sometimes it feels like there's a parade every weekend. What exactly is this fascination with the colorful traditions that brought artists from around the globe to immerse themselves in this culture? Pre-COVID, around 1.7 million people visited San Miguel yearly. And how many of them really know the story of how this colonial town became a magnet for creative folks and intellectuals alike? And there's no better place to start the story than this Day of the Dead altar honoring Casio del Palmar, the Peruvian painter who founded this school, the now famous Escuela de Bellas Artes. Casio socialized with the likes of Picasso, Chagall, and Matisse. If you look behind you, you can see the courtyard and building that was previously a dilapidated convent that Casio helped finance with, rumor has it, the sale of 2 of his original Paul Gauguin paintings. A visit to the cemetery on Day of the Dead has been the tradition for a very long time. Here we can find some of the creative souls who made San Miguel into the artist mecca it is today. Sterling Dickinson, who was hired by Casio del Palmar to be the director of Bellas Artes. He worked with the U.S. government after World War II to enable returning veterans like these women to come study at his art school in San Miguel, and that the costs would be covered by the benefits of the GI Bill. And not only American expats, San Miguel became a magnet for artists from all over the world. Romeo Tabuena, a prestigious Filipino Cubist painter who lived and studied in New York and Paris, was attracted to San Miguel by the Mexican muralism movement. And of course, David Alfredo Segueros, who was one of the founders of the modern school of Mexican mural painting, came to teach at Bellas Artes, and his mural still stands today. So why exactly has San Miguel de Allende become the muse for so many artists, writers, poets, hippies, intellectuals, and all-around creative folk? Let's find out. There was a gentleman named Sterling Dickinson who came to San Miguel from Chicago in the late 30s at the invite of Jose Mojica, the famous opera star and actor.
As we came up, we hit the plaza about, it must have been maybe 5:45. There was just beginning to be enough light, and I looked up and saw the parroquia sticking out of the fog, and I said, my gosh, what a place. I think I must have decided at that minute I was going to stay here, because 10 days later I bought the house I'm living in right now. Well, there was nothing here, of course. I was the only American in town. I met a Peruvian named Casio del Palmar, came to San Miguel, and he asked me if I would join him in starting an art school for the first year of the school, which was 1938. And then the following year, he managed to talk to the governor, and we got what is now Bellas Artes. And then for a good many years, we were there in Bellas Artes.
Well, it was a little shorter initially than he had hoped for. Sterling Dickinson reported for duty.
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
And who was sent to fend off the Japanese attacks in the Philippines but the well-known 201st Fighter Squadron, a heroic Mexican air unit that helped the U.S. Air Forces defeat Japan. They were known as the Aztec Eagles, and their mascot was Pancho Pistoles from the Disney film The Three Caballeros, which had its opening premiere in Mexico City, not Hollywood, just a year earlier. One of the pilots of the 201st Squadron was from San Miguel, and today there's a plaque recognizing the heroic war efforts of Luis Perez Lara, right in the center of town. Meanwhile, Sterling Dickinson was serving his military duty as an officer in U.S. Naval Intelligence, and later at the Office of Strategic Services, which was the forerunner of the CIA. After the war, Sterling recruited hundreds of American veterans to come down to San Miguel and study art at Bellas Artes on the GI Bill of Rights. This forever changed the destiny of this small Mexican town in the mountains north of Mexico City.
I came to San Miguel on the GI Bill. I was a control tower operator during the war. And afterwards, I went to the American Academy of Art in Chicago. A friend of mine who was there told me about San Miguel, that he was going on the GI Bill. So I decided to go also. And I came in the middle of June 1947. We were about, I would say, 125 GIs. And there was a nice spirit between us. The town at that time was quite small. It was 3 blocks in each direction, and it was just countryside around it. The thing was that we really loved the type of life. It was very primitive, but we enjoyed it. We really did. We were mostly at the school, which was at Bellas Artes, right here in the center of town.
In the beginning, Pomar founded the school, a fine art school, and Sterling Dickinson, of course, was the director.
Sterling was a wonderful guy. He just loved San Miguel. He did so many things for the people. He loved baseball, and he had his baseball team. He had a group of men, and he helped them all the time.
And then, of course, when I was first at the school, Siqueiros was here, and we had some very interesting conversations with him. He was a great one for telling jokes.
This full-room mural painted by Siqueiros and its team of artists still stands today at Bellas Artes. Other famous Mexican muralists, such as Diego Rivera, also worked and lived in San Miguel during this time.
Those were interesting years. I mean, there were some very interesting people in town. Although I was at art school, I got involved in bullfighting.
When I first came to San Miguel, I've always loved horses, and I've always ridden since I was a little girl. And one night after we'd had a few drinks at one of the local bars, some of the men said, "Hey, you love to ride, and you love horses, and you love all that. What about being in the bullfight tomorrow?" They said, you could pick, and you could be the picadora. And I had no idea, really, but I think I'd had a few drinks. And I said, okay, sure.
The public was very much enthused to see a gringa being a picador. There had never been a woman picador, and I don't think there ever has been. I would be the one that would come out on horseback and then bring all of the bullfighters into the ring. So it was rather exciting.
When I was going to get married, my father-in-law asked me, "Do you plan on keeping your bullfighting after you're married?" He was very worried because nice women in those days did not do that. And I said, "No, Don Miguel, no, I'm not." So he was very much worried.
So Dottie Burke from Chicago did end up marrying Pepe Vidargas, a local San Miguel businessman, and the era of mestizaje, cultural mixing, had begun.
Pepe and I met bowling at the bowling alley, believe it or not. We're talking about 1947. This was very unusual. They had 2 alleys. And I was on the team for Bellas Artes, and Pepe was on the team for the men from San Miguel. And I'm sorry to say they beat us. But what I won was meeting my future husband.
This flow of foreign soldiers that melded into the culture didn't only help Sterling and Cosio School get off the ground. It also brought income for the local merchants. So in the late 40s, money began to flow into the city. Prior to this expat influx, San Miguel had been experiencing a depressed economy for over 100 years.
Middle of the 50s, of the 50s, people gradually started hearing about San Miguel from the GIs that had been here, from some publicity occasionally. And so little by little through the years, San Miguel started to become quite popular.
In the following decade of the 60s, the Beat Generation poets and writers like Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, and Neal Cassady could be found downing tequilas at La Cucaracha, the same watering hole that Dottie Vidargas had accepted that historical first woman picadora dare over a decade earlier. Jack Kerouac had catapulted to fame with the publication of his novel, On the Road, that was considered the defining work of the beat and counterculture generations. And Allen Ginsberg could be found reading his poetry at the Instituto Allende. Even Walt Disney fell in love with San Miguel and chose it as his shooting location and setting for Disney set the story on the feast day of St. Anthony, who is known to be the protector of animals. Walt didn't need to cast many extras as the local San Miguel residents flocked to the main parish with their pets, as they do every January, to pray for their health and receive the blessing. It's a great setting for a story about a boy who was trying to save a horse from being put to death.
Friends, we here today are especially fortunate, for this is the feast day of the good Saint Anthony, the patron saint of the blessing of the animals.
Rumor has it that Walt Disney modeled Sleeping Beauty's castle in Disneyland after San Miguel's Grand Cathedral. And one of the artists at the Walt Disney Studio, James Pinto, was hired by Sterling Dickinson to teach at Bellas Artes. And just a few years later, Sterling and Cosio decided to restore an 18th century Renaissance palace on the other side of San Miguel to open a new art school, the Instituto Allende. James Pinto became the head of the art department there, and following in the footsteps of the Mexican muralist movement of the time, adorned the walls and halls of the Instituto with huge character-driven murals. And now it's 70 years later, and the Mexican muralist movement is alive and well in San Miguel. This series of murals was commissioned recently by the city's Director of Cultural Traditions and lines the walls of an underpass, calling itself the Urban Art Gallery. But these are far from the only murals in San Miguel. Hundreds of murals have been popping up all over town for years on buildings in most of the major neighborhoods, giving further credence to San Miguel's moniker of International Artist Colony. And nowhere is more of an epicenter for San Miguel's art scene than Fábrica La Aurora. Housed in a former textile factory, which opened in the year 1900, it employed over 1,000 workers and marked the beginning of industrialization and unionization in the small Mexican town. Although they have kept much of the historical industrial machinery intact, Fábrica La Aurora is now home to dozens of art galleries, shops, and restaurants. And one of the biggest parties of the year, of course, is the Art Walk to celebrate Day of the Dead. And you can imagine the art hanging on those old factory walls is quite exquisite. Our Immersive Dome project will feature several different artists each month, so the experience will always be different and fun. There are some amazing artists here from the four corners of the world.
¿Por qué vengo a San Miguel de Allende? Me gusta arte y cultura mexicana. Voy a empezar siempre con abstracto, pintura abstracto. Luego voy a buscar qué imagen tienen dentro. Primero vi a una mujer. Después pinto varias imágenes de caricaturas de cuando era niño. Esta pintura puede decir como mi historia casi. Cuando empecé a dibujar, casi todo son caricaturas. Me gustan los dioses. Y ahorita estoy pensando más de guerra o de cerebro, de no sé, como algo así más loco. No pases porque me muero. ¿Por qué yo pinto? Es muy difícil para explicar. Es con pasión, algo así. La sierra de Guanajuato.
So this ends the rough demo of the San Miguel Artist Colony Dome Show. And we are looking forward to the day when, perhaps, the dome could be located in the vicinity of this amazing art space. So now we are continuing on our path to produce Birth of an Art Colony.